Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, I am so honored to be here with Rabbi Dr. David Fox from Chai Lifeline to speak about empathic communication with those who are suffering. Just to introduce and give some background to what we're doing today, I'm Alexandra Feingold. I'm the Clean Speech Project Manager for New York City and New Jersey. Clean Speech, for those who don't know, is a 30-day challenge that promotes and inspires and educates people with Jewish tools for positive and mindful speech. Our goal is to, for 1 month, work on improving our speech and unite our communities around using our words to build each other up rather than destroy one another and tear each other down. So Rabbi Dr. David Fox, thank you so much for being here, by the way,
Good, thank you.
is a forensic and clinical psychologist, professor, and author. He also serves as a Dayan or rabbinical judge and directs the crisis and trauma services for Chai Lifeline, which, if you don't know, is an international healthcare support organization that provides care to individuals, families, and communities who are in distress. And the work that they do is absolutely incredible. It's really unbelievable. If you're not familiar with them, definitely check out their website and learn more about Chai Lifeline because they're bringing joy to people who are suffering with some of the most imaginable circumstances. And so we're going to be talking today about that and how we can use our words to inspire and uplift and give support to people in our lives who are suffering. So thank you so much for being here. I want to start by talking about the work that Chai Lifeline does and how they're able to give hope and joy to people, to children and families who are facing really, really difficult illnesses and tragedies. Obviously, it can be really hard to be strong when life is like just crashing down around you and you don't know how you can possibly give hope to someone when you're so terrified yourself. And when you've never experienced a situation that the other person is going through. How are you able to teach Chai Lifeline volunteers to speak in a way that supports people and gives hope to children and families that are going through crises?
Our first rule in training volunteers and crisis interventionists is that listening is much more important than speaking. And we generally go into an intervention scene without a lot of preconceived plans. We have some general strategies for working with trauma and working with crisis, but we want to observe the person or the persons who are struggling. We want to prompt them to begin giving a voice to their pain or to their fright or to their sadness, or to their rage. So we start off really by doing a lot less speaking and a lot more listening. And our team members are trained to listen with great attentiveness and focus in identifying where the core of this person's distress is. For example, is it in their emotions? Is it being held in their body? The physical distress or pain? Is it with persistent and recurrent horrible images and thoughts that are going through their mind? Or is it showing up in some other area? And a lot of what we're doing in crisis intervention is prompting them to give a voice, to put into their own words what they're experiencing. And we listen and we feed back, we mirror back what they're telling us about themselves. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't do any self-disclosure. We sort of leave the me and the I out of it. And we're just focused on reflecting and validating. And when we're able, we'll normalize something that terrifies people after a shocking event, is that there's something wrong with them. They become defective, or they're going insane, all sorts of wild and scary thoughts. And so generally we'll be able to normalize and help them understand that what they're going through may be a very normal reaction to an abnormal event. So we speak very little. We reflect back what they're saying, and then we'll direct them, we'll prompt them to do more release of that tension or that fear or that distress.
Got it. So mainly focusing on the person that you're trying to help, speaking as little as possible, being a mirror for them to be able to, for them to reflect on their process, their trauma. And just to give some background, because I realize people listening might really be unaware of the work Chai Lifeline does, could you explain a bit more about the crises that people are dealing with? If you could give some examples, and if you could just explain a bit how the volunteers are actually helping, like what they do.
Yeah, just in brief summary. So we are addressing virtually every type of crisis situation or trauma. It may be health related, it may be death related, it may be because of a natural disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake or a flood. It may be because of a human-induced tragedy like an assault or like self-harm. It may be a traffic accident. It may be a situation that affects just one individual, or it may be something that involved many, many witnesses or many victims. So the entire range of traumatizing events are addressed by our team, and we go through a very rigorous program of outfitting our volunteers with a variety of clinical skills, intervention skills, ways to communicate, rapid assessment of where this person is being most harmed by the event or the incident. And then, of course, where needed, we'll do triage, we'll do referrals as well. We're not doing a psychotherapy service per se, but we're doing, as you said, a processing after we've carefully assessed and listened, and to bring them to a place where they can cope and they can function once again.
I love that you spoke about how the importance of listening and the importance of identifying where their pain is coming from, like the root, the core of their underlying pain. A lot of times when people that we love are going through crises, it's like we don't even know what we can say. For example, paying a Shiva call, for example, you spoke about Chai Lifeline dealing with just in general deaths. When it's brought down in Jewish law that when someone's paying a Shiva call or visiting a mourner to pay respects after someone has passed away, they shouldn't speak before the mourner opens the conversation first. And I think people get so uncomfortable because they have the best intentions, but they don't know, because it's such a sensitive time, what they could possibly say that would be worth anything to the mourner, that could be beneficial sort of at all. Do you think, how important do you think it is to say anything? Because you spoke about listening, and and what are some examples of what you think could be constructive in such circumstances to even say?
Well, thank you for referencing that Jewish law, and that is really part of our paradigm for the model that we're using, namely that we don't presumptuously go in and start lecturing or preaching or guiding or offering advice. We listen to the victim or the survivor or the witness. So we're very much drawing on that Jewish traditional foundation. When a person begins describing what they've been through, what the objective event was, and what the subjective reaction is inside of themselves, we very carefully avoid doing what many people with great intentions are going to do at the Shiva house or following any other type of catastrophe. Namely, they try to distract the person, or they try to cheer the person up.
Right.
That entirely invalidates the reality of what this person is going through right now. So if someone brings up trivia or talks a lot about themselves or says, I know exactly what you're going through, and they really divert the focus away from this victim or this survivor or this grieving person by talking about their own experience, they've lost that person. They really can't be of any effective assistance to them. Or if they prematurely try to cheer them up or to offer them words of comfort prematurely. Even the Jewish concept of consoling the mourner, it's really an oxymoron. It's a euphemism, because the last thing in Jewish tradition, the last thing that our sages want us to attempt doing is to console the person when they're in the midst of their grief. So we don't do that, but we prompt them, if they're comfortable, to talk about where it hurts, what happened. And we gradually want them to form a bridge between their awareness that they're in distress and how that distress is very likely a product of the reality, the objective event that they just experienced. A lot of people, when they're in the midst of suffering, they lose sight of that. They don't know what's come over them. They're afraid they're going to break down. They think they're going insane. All sorts of very, very frightening thoughts flood them. And they lose sight of the fact that what you're going through is a reaction to what happened. And as the saying goes, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal event is really a normal reaction. And this is really the direction we're taking people. We don't cheer them up. We don't distract them. We don't take them away from what they're going through, but we cautiously ask them to take a deep dive, very careful, gentle, deep dive into the core of what's hurting them and to find words for it. Just very briefly, some of the neuroscience of it. When a person's in a traumatic state, a lot of their brain activity, the majority of the brain activity is taking place in an area of the brain that actually has no language, does not have the ability to articulate or verbalize all of the cauldron, all the chaos that's going on inside of them. They don't have language, they don't have words. And if you prematurely try to get them to talk, they're going to shut down their emotions. And this is why we don't do a lot of talking. We sit with them, we observe them, and we gradually start, as I said, helping them see there is a bridge to cross. There's a connection between all of this confusion and the event that happens. So we'll gradually get them to talk about that link until they rediscover their language. And that actually shifts a lot of that brain activity into the area of the brain that does have the ability to start making sense of things and to talk about them. That's an encapsulated 4-hour lecture in 2 minutes, but that's really what we're doing.
That is so interesting. The fact that there's some pain that or experiences that you can't even put to words. And so, and that makes sense because even trying to put it into words sort of diminishes it and belittles the pain that someone's going through. I'm sure you're familiar with the term toxic positivity, right?
Yes.
You're familiar with that? Yeah. So that's, I feel like a lot of times when someone is going through something really difficult and we don't have the words and we want to just give them hope, make them feel better, but we might ourselves lack the emotional tools, the language tools to provide support in a way that is just validating, that is just listening. So we go to statements like, oh, at least XYZ, or imagine it could be worse. Someone I know went through XYZ, or, try to stay positive. You're so strong. You can get through this. It can feel so invalidating. And it's really the opposite of what Chai Lifeline does. How are you able to provide hope and joy to people through Chai Lifeline while avoiding toxic positivity? Because it's such a fine line. I've seen some of the videos about Chai Lifeline's incredible work, and the people who go to Chai Lifeline for support, they're so happy. Like I've seen just the most incredible stories of how people are really given like new hope and life through Chai Lifeline's work. And it's not toxic positivity, it's genuine positivity. How are you able to do that?
So each of the examples you gave are the ones that we instruct people not to use, not to say any sentence that begins with the word at least, not to compare someone's tragedy to someone else's, it could have been worse, not to say be strong. These are exactly scripted out of our training manual, the things we avoid saying. We don't aim for joy and glee and hope, or even for them to reframe what happened in some type of positive reinterpretation. They may get there with time. And we find that most of the people in crisis, they need more than a single dialogue. We will generally aim for 3 separate sessions with them. But our goal ultimately may be to help them recover a sense of hopefulness. We do think hope is almost a spiritual and definitely a neurocognitive and actually neurobiological capacity that people in time can begin to harness to pull them ahead. But we don't rush them there, because one has to first be self-aware and be mindful that they're in distress. We have to get them to a stage where they can become self-aware of what's not feeling good, and then to express, to be able to articulate, eventually put it into words. They will be guided with time to look for meaning. They will be guided in time to see if there's any purpose they can take away from what's happened to them, things they might now be able to do they couldn't do up until now. They can do some learning sort of retrospectively, and from that will come a feeling of hopefulness. From that may come a feeling of being re-regulated or balanced inside. But we don't hold out any false encouragement or toxic positivity, that the goal here is to get them smiling. Most people aren't ready for that.
Mhm. And it's so important not to rush them there. And a lot of times we rush to find the meaning of why God did this, or why are we going, or am I as healed as I should be at this point? How do you, how do you track their progress, that they don't necessarily feel rushed to find the positive outlook, like the silver lining to their trauma, but that they also don't succumb to the trauma and like stay in a really, really low place for a long period of time?
So I would say 90% or more of people who've gone through a traumatizing incident, if they're given the space to process, to develop self-awareness, to eventually express what they're going through, and to feel that they can ground themselves in the event the anxiety begins to escalate, or they begin to panic, or they feel that sadness drawing them down, they can ground themselves through certain physical body focus techniques, some cognitive techniques, and of course, working with their emotions. So we find that the high majority of them do well. Those who want to jump into spiritual dimensions, we generally goad them not to jump too fast. We find that jumping into some spiritual zone and asking, why did God do this, and what is the meaning of this, if that's done before the emotional processing is done, they're going to crash. Mm-hmm. The intensity of the distress that they just suppressed is going to rebound. It's going to get hold of them. But with time, those who want to work with the interventionists on finding some sense of meaning or purpose, we can do that. Sometimes we'll prompt them to go to the rabbi or to the rebbitzin or a trusted adult who cares about them. Although we do train our staff to be available for those who want to process spiritually as well.
Is there any sort of, you said 3 sessions it at least takes of them just processing their trauma before they're able to find some sort of like hope or silver lining? Is that the average, you would say? Or how is there a length of time that you find is like average for people to process their trauma?
It's going to depend on their age and maturity. It's going to depend on the abject severity or lack of severity of what they just experienced. It's also going to hinge somewhat on whether they have a prior history of going through trauma and whether
Okay.
they have any mental health history. It's going to hinge also on their readiness to work with an interventionist. And then I think lastly, it'll also depend on how much proximity there is between the event and the intervention. If someone waits a month before seeking intervention, it's going to be a more difficult process. We generally find that within a day or two, sometimes even more rapidly, but within a day or two of the traumatizing event, that's the prime interval to begin looking at themselves and working this through. So a lot of the path that they'll follow and the length of time it may require will be contingent on all of those other variables.
Mm-hmm. So it very much differs from person to person, and it's all about accepting the pace that you're processing the trauma at. It's so counterintuitive because nothing you said has been about saying something that helps another person feel good. You're actually saying things that help people deal with pain and feel bad, feel how they feel how they're expected to feel when they're going through something as horrible as what they're going through. Can you give some, I would love to give practical examples to the listeners of things, of statements that they could say to help validate pain for other people and to help people just sit and process painful negative emotions? Because I think a lot of people just don't know. It's so much easier just to resort to, you're going to get through this, you'll be okay. You know?
So we first want to establish what I call trustworthiness. Using that time to establish strong, enduring trust, because you're new on the scene, they don't know you, you're not going to have an ongoing relationship. But your own demeanor, your own composure, the gentleness of your voice, your ability to make eye contact and to sustain it, and the obvious focus on them and not on yourself. And also, hopefully, freedom yourself from any other noxious bad habits, that you're not fidgeting and you're not nervous. But going in and establishing some sense of trustworthiness is where we begin with people. And sometimes just the eye contact and the soothing glance, the gentle posture, maintaining a respectful boundary, that will engender enough ease in a person. They'll begin talking spontaneously. They'll sort of self-activate. For those who don't, we may need to begin with a statement such as, you've just gone through a tragedy, or you've just experienced a loss, to let them know in brief words that we are aware of what happened. Then sometimes they'll begin spontaneously speaking. Sometimes we'll observe them and we'll make an observation about something we're noticing, like they're tapping their foot or their body is shaking, they're weeping. We'll observe that. And then we may start by saying, give a voice to them, to talk about that. I'm not going to say talk with me about it because I keep me out of it, but I'll say, put it into words. I may need to explain to some people that as you become more aware of what you're going through, it's so important to be able to externalize it. So I may actually explain why I'm prompting them to talk. I am going to avoid statements like, you have to be strong, or you can pull through this, or you can handle this. I'm not going to say things, well, at least you didn't lose both legs, you only lost one leg. I've heard people say such things like that. At least you have other children who did survive, but we're not going to say miserable things like that. But we are going to prompt them to talk about where it hurts, where the sadness is. And then, as we said, we're going to mirror, we're going to validate, we're going to listen, we're going to prompt over. And only when we notice that they're beginning to breathe easier, the posture has shifted into a more relaxed one, they're talking more freely, then we know that we are on the right path with them. And then we may shift. Let's say they began talking about body distress. We may shift then to emotional distress, or we may shift to the thoughts, the cognitive distress. But we are going to try covering all 5 dimensions, namely thought, emotion, physical sensation, behavior change, and then ultimately the spiritual struggles they're having. Okay, I've got time for just if you wish another moment. I have a crisis intervention. I have to give a talk, a tragedy in a part of the world, and I told them I would be on at 12 o'clock my time. So if we have another minute,
Oh, sure. So we can definitely wrap up then, no problem.
okay.
So I think it was so powerful just to recap what you just said. Phrases like you've just experienced a trauma, you're going through something really hard, you've just experienced a loss, prompting the person who's suffering to express their pain in words, validating their pain where they feel it, and most importantly, which I love that you talked about, is body language, not saying anything, but speaking gently, speaking, maintaining eye contact, which is so important, showing that you're listening, that you're not distracted, all of the body language. This is all a huge component of how to make someone feel better, and also clean speech. It's not just about our words, it's also about our body language and making people feel heard and understood and validated. Thank you so, so much, Dr. Fox, for spending time talking about this with me today. If you are interested in more of the incredible, incredible work Chai Lifeline does, or even being a volunteer, please check out their website, Chai Lifeline. And also go, if you're interested in improving your communication skills and focusing for 1 month in November on speaking more mindfully and positively, learning how to better support those in your life, you can sign up for the Clean Speech Challenge at cleanspeech.com/NYC. And every day begin working to improve your speech for 30 days with us. Thank you so much again, and I learned a lot from speaking with you today.
My honor. Keep up your wonderful work. Take care.
Bye-bye.